Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. We're going to do something a little bit different today rather than go with NBA news or anything like that. We're going to do how we look at the state of the NBA in terms of our top 10 current players, not all time, just where they sit right now in August before the season starts, how we look at it. So, Sap, we're gonna go from 10 on up, right?
Yep.
And we can switch off. I'll kick us off with who I have at number 10. And that's one of my favorite players in the league, Dame Lillard. That's my 10th best player.
I'm right with you. And we did not divulge our list before
No.
recording this podcast. So it's not like I sent you my 10 guys and you sent me my 10 guys. I have him at number 10. Look, he's a sensational player. I don't know if he's going to be in Portland next year. I think he's one of those players who's done what he can to try to make the Portland Trailblazers relevant. But right now it's time for Portland to shit or get off the pot. They're never in a position to draft well because they're always in the postseason. So they're never in the lottery. And it's not a free agent destination. You know, they would have had to have draft picks really pop and able to get players that were better than where they were drafted. And then they haven't been able to do that. CJ McCollum is a nice player, but I think you're better off if he's your third or fourth guy. He's oftentimes the number 2 guy in Portland, but I've got Dame number 10. And look, I think everybody likes Dame. He's not a huge guy, right? He's like 6'1", maybe. He's got such a well-rounded game. He's an interesting personality. So I'm with you. I got him at number 10.
Yeah, I mean, last year's coming off one of the best seasons of his career, and I think he's the most clutch player in the NBA.
Yeah.
He just has that gene. He turns it on in the fourth quarter and in close games, almost 29 points a game, 92%, 93% from the free throw line, gets you 7.5 assists a game. I mean, he does everything you would want a point guard to do. And he just turned 31, so he's probably got about 2 years left in his prime, I would say.
Mhm.
Sap. But yeah, I mean, if he's traded, it's certainly going to shake up the dynamic of the NBA if he goes to a team that's a contender because he's that good of a player. I am going to guess, Sap, that we have the exact same top 10, not necessarily in order, but I think that we have the same 10 players. That's my guess.
I think it's pretty simple. I mean, it oftentimes, you know, the best podcast, radio, whatever, people having these wide-ranging disagreements of like, why isn't this guy in there and why is this guy in there? And look, there's a couple players that, if healthy, I would have them in my top 10, but there's always a question mark about that. And maybe there's a recency bias, and I've left a couple guys off that had kind of down years last year, partly because of injury. So I think we're probably pretty close. My number 9 guy is Nikola Jokic, the reigning league MVP, who, look, I think he gets the most out of his ability.
Yeah.
And I think he deserved MVP last year. If Joel Embiid had played maybe 10 more regular season games, he would have been the MVP. He had a better year than Jokic, but the breadth of his skill is just phenomenal. I mean, he's a guy who's almost a triple-double playing center. So I have Nikola Jokic at number 9.
I have Jokic higher, but I have Kawhi Leonard at number 9. The only reason I have him at that low is because he's just not durable. I think when healthy, he's the best. He's the best two-way player in the game. I know that's a trope and everybody says that, but it's true. I think he's elite defensively and he's more well-rounded than Giannis offensively. He's got a mid-range game. He's got a 3-point shot. So him and Giannis might be equal defensively, or, you know, you could pick your poison a little bit. But when Kawhi is healthy and engaged, he's just deadly as an offensive player too. We see what he's done in the playoffs before. You know, he's won 2 championships with 2 different teams. So I have Kawhi Leonard at number 9. Sap. At number 8, I have James Harden. He is a guy whose game I do not like to watch. I can't stand him. I think, 60% of his game is just drawing fouls, which is maddening. But you can't ignore the statistics, which are, I mean, he has all-time great numbers. I'm not talking about all for right now. Historically, he has all-time great numbers. He's a triple-double machine. We saw how important he was to Brooklyn when he was healthy last year. He can really run an offense despite being a primary scorer when he wants to. He's an incredible dribbler. He's an incredible shooter. He's a phenomenal passer. I mean, there's really not a lot that he can't do on the court besides engage defensively. When he
Mhm.
wants to, he's a okay enough defender. He's passable. I mean, he's never going to be great, but it's just that he hasn't shown a willingness, and he had some injury issues at the end of last year too. But yeah, James Harden, number 8 for me.
I have him at number 8 as well. And I just was really impressed with him last year, how he adapted to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. He was the player that had to change the most because those two guys were already there. And he was coming from Houston. He forced his way there, which I don't think anybody was a big fan of. But on the court, he's a marvelous player. I have him at number 8 as well. Again, I'm not a fan of his style of play. It doesn't necessarily always translate to the postseason because the officials aren't going to blow the whistle as often as they do in the regular season. So a lot of those cheap points that he gets in the regular season aren't there for the postseason. Kind of like Karl Malone. Karl Malone was a guy who lived at the free throw line, but when you get to the postseason, especially in the finals, the officials aren't going to put you on the line as much as they do at other times of the year. But I have Harden at number 8.
Number 7, Sap, who you got?
Joel Embiid, who, if his mind's in the right place and he's in great condition and durable, I mean, he could go up as high as he wants. He's that talented, the most skilled big man since Hakeem Olajuwon. I didn't say the best big man since Hakeem Olajuwon. That would be Shaquille O'Neal. But in terms of pure skill, this guy is off the charts. I mean, he's 7'1", 280, 290 pounds. He's got a 3-point shot. He's a great free throw shooter, great mid-range game, can score with his back to the basket. He's an accomplished defender. He's even got a nice, post game and an ability to pass off of that. So I have Embiid at number 7. It's just lack of durability and at times lack of conditioning kind of leaves him at number 7 rather than at number 3 or 4.
Yeah, I have him at 7 too. And again, we did not share our lists
No.
before this, Sap. We did not. We just are very like-minded in our opinions of the NBA because we're students of the game, Sap. We're very
Yes.
intelligent people. Yeah, I mean, for all the same reasons you said, and I think he can rise higher in this list. With the other guys that I talked about before, Harden and Lillard especially, I don't really see them being able to rise much higher in the list. Kawhi, I think when he's healthy, can. But Embiid, as you said, could, if he plays every game and wins a title, you could make a case in that given season he's the best player in the league. He's got all the skills that you would need. He can be as dominant as a player is in the NBA. At times he looks like the best player in the league. So yeah, he's 7 and he could rise higher. It's all about conditioning and durability. And those are really the only questions about Joel Embiid. This is not talent because there's nothing he can't do on a basketball court.
No, it's kind of interesting. If you'd been a Philadelphia 76ers fan for, say, the last 40 years, you've seen two great centers, Moses Malone and Joel Embiid, and they're like polar opposites. Embiid is incredibly talented, frustrating at times because he's not durable. I don't know how committed he is to improving his craft or being all in terms of conditioning. And then you got Moses Malone, who took every ounce of talent that he had and got the most out of it and then some because he just worked harder than everybody. He was one of the most committed basketball players I've ever seen. I know I have a tendency of somewhat overrating him. I think he's the 4th greatest center in the history of the league behind only Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Wilt Chamberlain. I put him ahead of Olajuwon, and I put him ahead of Shaquille O'Neal. That's how much I think of Moses Malone. If Joel Embiid ever woke up one day and had the drive and desire that Moses Malone had, look out, he'd own the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people think that. And, maybe part of the reason that he hasn't is because it's been an awkward fit at times with Ben Simmons. So maybe if they're able to move him and get more shooters around him, he'll look even better. You'll take a little bit of the scoring pressure on him because I think very few, if any, players in the league had more scoring pressure on him this past season, in the past couple of years than Joel Embiid, because his second is his teammate just won't shoot. I mean, it's not, other guys, like we talk about Doncic's teammates in Dallas, and they're not very good, and none of them are as good as Ben Simmons. But at least you got like somebody like Tim Hardaway who will shoot and score. It takes some pressure off you. Teams don't even play defense on Ben Simmons. He either scores in transition when they have a numbers game, or he doesn't do anything. I mean, it's maddening. So I think a ton of pressure has been on Embiid for scoring the basketball, and that fatigues you.
Oh, without question. I mean, I think we're all kind of hoping, or at least as basketball fans, maybe you as a Celtics fan don't want to see this happen, but could you imagine Dame Lillard with Joel Embiid. That would be just a phenomenal pairing because you've got the big man, the small man, would take some pressure off of Embiid. I think that would work so well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would work like gangbusters. I would, I might make them my favorites in the East because I'd like the fit better than the fit in Brooklyn because I
Mhm.
think Philadelphia has a chance to be a better defensive team. But we'll see if that happens. Obviously, it would have happened if the Blazers were interested in Ben Simmons. It would have happened by now, clearly.
Mhm.
And I don't blame them for not being. He had a horrible postseason, and he's followed it up with an offseason where he's been completely MIA and
Mhm.
despondent. So hard to trade your franchise player for a guy who you just don't know about. Let's move ahead, Sep, to number 6. I have Steph Curry at number 6. He is the best shooter of all time. I mean, we can't say that enough. He was the leading scorer in the NBA last year, despite not having all that much help. He did bring the Warriors into the playoffs, to the play-in, and then to the playoffs. No, they lost to the Grizzlies,
Mhm.
just the play-in game, Sap. We know what he can do. You don't really have to say all that much about Steph Curry because we know who he is. And this season, the Warriors should be better. Klay Thompson's coming back. They've added some interesting rookies. James Wiseman is coming back from injury. We know what Draymond Green is. Still, we saw in the Olympics a phenomenal defensive player and playmaker. So the Warriors should be better this year. And Steph still remains one of the best players in the league. The only reason I have him at 6 and not higher is because I do think, even though he had an amazing statistical season, I do think he is maybe a little bit on the back nine. He's never been a great defender. I don't think he's going to get any better at defense. So I'm going to just knock him a little bit for not being a great defender. And also last year, it's not like the team around him was terrible. Obviously, it's not as good as it has been or as good as it will be this year. But I thought they could have maybe been even a little bit slightly better. So I'll ding him a little bit for that, but that's just nitpicking.
Yeah, I go with Kawhi Leonard at number 6. I agree with you. He's the best two-way player in the league. Although you can make a case now that Giannis is, because they're both great defenders. Kawhi's offensive game is so efficient and so pure. He's a great mid-range shooter. He can take it to the basket. He's an improved three-point shooter. He's also a great free throw shooter. He's really improved as a passer as well. I mean, his game continually gets better, but again, the lack of durability is a ding against him. So I have him at number 6, and I have Steph Curry at number 5. I think he influences a game as much as any other player in the league, but on the defensive end, that is an area where Steph is a liability. But I have Steph at number 5 and Kawhi at number 6.
Yeah, number 5, I have Nikola Jokic. You talked about him earlier, the reigning MVP. I mean, I love his game. I think it might be the most unique skill set in the NBA. Just to be that big and to be that gifted of a passer is crazy.
Hmm.
And he was able to keep the team afloat despite losing their second best player in Jamal Murray for a long period of time. And in the playoffs, it finally caught up to him. But I just love Jokic. I think that he can be the best player on a championship team. He's not the greatest defensive player in the world, but he's not a liability defensively. Like, I do think Steph sometimes can be a liability defensively. I think sometimes Damian Lillard can be a
Hmm.
liability defensively. I think James Harden oftentimes is a liability defensively. So Jokic, I give him credit for, he's not the most athletic guy in the world, but he's not gonna hurt you on the defensive side. He's competent enough. And I mean, like, we talk about somebody who could do everything. He can shoot threes, he can play in the post, he can pass, he can put the ball on the floor. I just love Jokic's game. And the reason I think Embiid might be a little more talented in terms of dominance, but Jokic is so durable. So I mean, I can't put Embiid for me over Jokic because the guy played every game last year. We've talked about this ad nauseum, Sap. In the last show, you talked about this too. Embiid's played less than 50% of his games since he's come into the NBA. I mean, Jokic played every game last year. It's a stark difference.
It really is. It really is. I mean, I think at his best, Embiid's the better player, but you can count on Nikola Jokic because he shows up, and that's obviously very, very important. The top 4 players, we're in agreement, I'm sure, on who the top 4
Yeah,
players are, but we just want to see where we rank them. So, who's your number
I
4?
think I think we have them in the same order too, Sap. I have Luka Doncic at number
Yeah,
4,
me too.
and I think he will continue to quickly rise up these ranks. I think, and any given year, he can win MVP. He was the favorite last year going into the season. I wouldn't surprise me if he won it this upcoming year. He's that good. Should only get better because he's still crazy young. As they put more talent around him, hopefully in Dallas, that will improve his odds of winning MVP. And since he's such a great playmaker, should just improve his own game as well. He's the sky's the limit for Luka Doncic. He could end up being in one of the all-time great players. That's how good he is.
Yeah, I have him at number 4 as well. Again, better conditioning, better effort on the defensive end. And again, if he gets some help in Dallas, I think at some point, maybe 3 years from now, he can be the best player in basketball because his offensive skill set is so unique. There's nothing he can't do on the offensive end. Maybe he's not quite the scorer Kevin Durant is, but he's a better passer than Kevin Durant. Heck, I think he's one of the 3 or 4 best passers in the league, along with LeBron James. Maybe put Chris Paul into that group as well. So I've got Luka at number 4. I've got LeBron at number 3, and this is painful because I think LeBron's been at the top of these lists for the last 12 to 14 years. And look, I think he can still get back to number 1 if he's healthy this year, has an MVP caliber season, which he was having last year. He was not only in the MVP discussion when he got hurt, but he was right there with Embiid as the favorite to win the MVP, got hurt, and never really was himself in the postseason. So he's less than a year removed from being the best player on the championship team, being a leading MVP contender. So I would never bet against him. If he goes out and has the typical LeBron James season, which is 26, 27 points per game, 8, 9 rebounds, 8, 9 assists, excellent defense, and the Lakers go ahead and win the title, he can take that mantle back as being the best player in the world. But sometimes we're prisoners to recency biases. And right now I put LeBron at number 3. Very painful for me, Jet. But, sometimes you got to be real here.
Yeah, I mean, I have him at number 3 too, Sep, and typically I look at him in any given year and say he's the best player on the planet, and I think you could certainly make a case for any of these guys in top 3 and not be wrong,
right,
in saying that they're the best player. I think LeBron, this is a big prove it year for him. Not that he has anything to prove, but if he wants to be considered still the best player in basketball, then he's got to stay healthier. I think that's what it comes down to for him. If he plays close to a full season and puts up his regular numbers and the Lakers finish with the top 1 or 2 seed in the West, then I think people will say he's the best player again. It's not like he has to do all that much more to get back to that top of the mountain. He's just got to stay healthy and the team's got to play a little bit better. I think both those things are well within reach for him. The team has done a good job, I feel, in the offseason of improving personnel. And so you would expect them to be a little bit better. But I think the big thing for him is how many miles he has. Can he play close to a full season? I don't think it's reasonable to expect him or really anybody to play 82 out of 82 games. That's a big ask. But can he play, 72 games? Can he play 72 and up? Can he miss 10 games or less? I think that will be the big determining factor for him if he goes. There's nothing that on the court that he can't do anymore. I mean, maybe he can't jump quite as high as he used to, but that still means he's probably only one of the 10 best jumpers in the NBA instead of the best jumper. I mean, so there's really nothing he can't do. It's just a matter of staying healthy, and he could easily be the best player in basketball next year. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But we both have him at number 3, and at number 2, I believe we both have Kevin Durant. Sep.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's quite the push to now anoint him as the best player in basketball because it was supposed to be his time, right? Because he's been the second best player in basketball for pretty much a decade, right? I mean, LeBron assumed that mantle, in the late aughts and shortly thereafter. I mean, once he started winning scoring titles, he won an MVP in 2014, and then he won a couple of championships with Golden State. The discussion was LeBron, Durant. I always thought it was LeBron over Durant because LeBron can do more. And the interesting thing is when you're comparing LeBron and Durant, they have the same scoring average in their career. So as much as Durant is the most lethal offensive weapon I've ever seen, again, the only player I can think of in league history who is an elite shooter and an elite scorer. I just can't think of anybody else that fits that description, but LeBron scores as much as Durant and nearly as efficient. Not quite as good at the free throw line, but from the field, just as efficient. And we know LeBron's a better rebounder, a better passer, and when he's engaged, he's a better defender because he's more versatile. But Durant right now is the number 2 player, and I've said this a few weeks ago. Durant right now may go down as the greatest player ever who was never the best player in the league. Like there's always at some point we can look at the 10 greatest players ever. At some point they were the best player in the league, whether it was LeBron or Michael, obviously, and then Russell had his run, and Wilt had his run, and Kareem had his run, and then you could talk about Magic and Bird, and Duncan was there, and Kobe was there, and Oscar Robertson, and Elgin Baylor, and all these great players. Durant might be the greatest player in league history who was never the best player in the league. Kind of like Alex Rodriguez kind of had that mantle in Major League Baseball. He never surpassed Barry Bonds when they were both playing at the same time. And then when Bonds retired, it felt like Pujols was the best player in baseball.
Yeah.
So I always thought of A-Rod as the best player, at least that I ever saw, that was never the best player. It sounds like a slight against the player, but it is a compliment. I have KD at number 2. Again, maybe if he's that final shot to force overtime in Game 7 was a 3, this discussion changes, because if that's a 3,
Yeah,
it's
I was
the
going to
Nets
say the same thing.
maybe
Seth.
winning the title. Yeah, I mean that's what it comes down to. And you know what? We're at a point in sports where it's about winning the championship, and he got eliminated in the second round, and the guy that we both have at number 1 won a championship.
Yeah, I think maybe he very well may have hit that. If his shoe was a little bit smaller, hit a 3, and then we're talking a completely different story about where we rank him and where we rank Giannis. But with Durant too, you also have to take. He's an unbelievable player. No one's taking away from him. He was the best player on Team USA. He's the best player in the Olympics. You could make a case he's the best player in the world, and you wouldn't be wrong. But part of what he does now is always going to be looked under the microscope of the NBA. In the NBA, is wow, he's had so much help. I mean, like, holy crap, look at the guys he's played with. We've talked about this before. I mean, the list of guys he's played with is ridiculous, the amount of talent he's played with. So fair or not, that's always going to be pushback on Kevin Durant and where he stands in the NBA, because he's chosen, and that's his right as a free agent or whatever, to play with uber talent as opposed to try to win with a little bit lesser talent. And so there's always going to be pushback on Kevin Durant and his legacy because of that, which, I think is fair. He clearly doesn't, but that's the way it goes. We both have Giannis at number 1. Here's Giannis's last 3 years, Sap. MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, wins the championship, and Finals MVP. Not bad to be Giannis Antetokounmpo. He obviously, we saw how dominant he was in the finals. He not only was the best player in the finals, that was one of the greatest performances in the history of the NBA Finals. He was that good. We're talking about, a 75-year history of the NBA this season, and he had as great of a finals as Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, LeBron, you name it. His finals was that good. It's not hyperbole. He was that dominant. No. Came back from being down 0-2. Remember in the prior round, was hurt too. I mean, you can't say enough about it. Did it all the ways that fans really want to see him do it. Stayed on the team, the small market team, won organically, kind of waved his ass in people's faces about it afterwards, which I love. He's an elite defensive player. He is a machine offensively where he's good. He cannot score from the outside, but he is the best paint player in the NBA, which is sort of remarkable because he's also handles the ball a lot. I just think he's earned it, Sap. I mean, is he as naturally gifted as KD or LeBron? No, he can't do the same things as him, but he's worked his ass off to get to a point where I think he's earned it. He's through sheer will has made himself into the best basketball player in the world right now. And will that hold for a year? Maybe not.
In the last 3 years, he's actually scored more points per game than Kevin Durant. And then when you factor in that he's a double-digit rebound machine, also a guy who averages 6 assists and is a better defender than Durant and more durable. And by the way, when they faced each other, he won. That's really what you have to look at. And as far as the more gifted and the better player, that's always a discussion. Let's look at 2 all-time great wide receivers. I think everybody is in agreement that Randy Moss is probably the most gifted wide receiver any of us has ever seen, but that Jerry Rice is the greatest wide receiver we've ever seen. That's a difference, right? I think Aaron Rodgers is more gifted than Tom Brady. Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback.
I think Tom Brady would say that too. I think Tom Brady would say that.
Yeah, and I know Aaron Rodgers would say it. because
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
certainly
we know that.
confident in himself. He would talk. He's talking about all these guys coming to win championships in Green Bay. It's just I must have missed him the last 10 years, and I'm his biggest guy. But yeah, it's just there's a difference there, and sometimes here's something that maybe Mark Twain. Mark Twain was famous from many things that he said, but that youth is wasted on the young. Sometimes talent is wasted on the talented. Now, I'm not saying that about Kevin Durant. He's uber talented, and look at what he's done. But sometimes the guy that's a little less talented is just so goddamn driven that it just kind of
Are you
puts
talking
him a
about
little
Ben
bit past him.
Simmons?
There's a perfect example, Jet. There's a guy who
Couldn't he be Giannis?
Oh, without question. Without question, he's as good a defender. If he's in position, he's as good a rebounder. So, he oftentimes handles the ball even more than Giannis, so he's maybe not in rebounding position. He's as good a passer, if not, I think even a better passer. He's as big and athletic, right? He's 6'11", 250. These both he and Giannis are like physical freaks on the court. They're nearly 7 feet tall, 250 pounds, and they have the athleticism of Russell Westbrook. And his shot doesn't look that bad, but he's afraid to take the shot, where I give Giannis all the credit in the world. He's like, yeah, he airballed a couple of free throws. I'm going back to the free throw line. And look,
yeah,
it paid off in
100%.
game six of the finals, 17 of 19 from the free throw line, because he just kept going there saying, I'm going to hit them. Where Ben Simmons is like, the free throw line, I don't want to take a shot here. So yeah, Ben Simmons could absolutely be, in that class. And he's one of the players that we left out of the top 10 because he just doesn't have that drive. Look, those three guys that we talked about, LeBron, Durant, and Giannis, I think they're in a class unto themselves, because these other guys that we love, like whether it be Steph or Kawhi or Luka, they have some sort of negative. These three guys don't have a negative, and they're also, by sheer size, that impactful. So yeah, but give Giannis all the credit.
Yeah, Giannis,
he's the guy now.
Giannis took his negative and said, I don't give a damn. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. Doesn't matter if you think I'm a bad free throw shooter. I'm just going to keep going to the line. He was, and they were fortunate that they got the matchup that they did, that, they were thin on the front line, the Suns, but credit to him. He took advantage of it and said, I'm just going to go over 40 every night. Then if they're not going to be able to defend me in the paint, I'm just going to dunk all over their head. It was so efficient too, because everything was coming on dunks. And I know Harden made fun of him a couple years ago about that too. Well, then if it's so easy, why doesn't everybody do it? It's not that easy. He's just so physically gifted.
No, if you're playing the Tennessee Titans and defensively you decide you're going to go with 6 defensive backs, expect Derrick Henry to run down your throat. That's exactly what Giannis did in the NBA Finals. The Phoenix did not build a wall. They played him one-on-one with DeAndre Ayton, who wasn't up to the task, and obviously Giannis destroyed him and won the championship. So he's the number one guy in the league right now. But again, that can be changed in the next year. If LeBron's healthy, plays at the level we expect him to, and they win a title, he can be number one. And if Durant wins a title with Brooklyn, carries that team to its first championship since the old ABA, then he could be the number one guy. And there's a lot of great players that we left out, whether it be Anthony Davis.
Yeah. Who was your toughest omission, Sap?
Anthony Davis, because I then
same.
Healthy, he's probably a top 6 or 7 guy. Again, we're talking about another guy who's as good defensively as Giannis, maybe even more.
He's maddening too. Isn't he maddening sometimes too, Anthony Davis?
He's not quite Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is really maddening, and Anthony Davis has put up great numbers. With him, I think it's more lack of conditioning, and I'm starting to talk like I'm, Alex Guerrero here about talking about conditioning. But look, when you're making that kind of money, that has to be a big part of what you do. You're a business. You're making 30, 40, $50 million a year. Put the money and time into being in the best shape you can. Your body is what makes you all your money. That's the problem with Anthony Davis. I think when he's on the court, he's going to give you max effort, and he's a brilliant basketball player. But the issues that you have with Anthony Davis is lack of durability, lack of conditioning. Again, I think that's something LeBron can maybe push forward on him in now their third year together.
Strangely enough, too, he also sometimes disappears, which you'll be like, he took 8 shots in that game? Why?
Yeah, it's like, why? Yeah, because he's a nightmare matchup, right? You can't cover him with. Giannis might be one of the few guys in the league that could say, okay, I'm going to take him. And even then, because Davis can go out and hit 3-pointers. He's not a great 3-point shooter, but that's kind of in his arsenal. Yeah. He gets kind of disengaged And look, this was a criticism, and I know, look, I think Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the fourth greatest player ever, and I think he's in the discussion of the greatest player. At times, Kareem would do that as well. It looked like he was not really engaged, but then if you pissed him off, look the hell out because he would just
Yeah,
dominate.
you'd like to see that from AD, right? Like,
you want to see a little bit. You want to see a little bit of
there
anger.
should never be games where he takes 8 shots,
No,
and it happened a
no.
bunch of times.
And it's not like he's playing with. Now he's playing with Russell Westbrook, but it's not like he played the last 2 years with a guy who was, look, LeBron's ball dominant, but if you're at the level of Anthony Davis and you're playing with LeBron, you get as many shots as you want. He'll set you up. So if you get that disengaged, that's on you, not on LeBron James. So yeah, he was the toughest omission. Look, if he's healthy and conditioned, healthy, engaged, all of that, he's a top 10 player without question. I mean,
Yeah, he should be.
I think Paul George deserves some merit because he had a great postseason. He carried the Clippers to the conference finals. And look, he's a guy who really doesn't have a discernible weakness. You look at his game, there's no weakness there, right? I mean, he can score at 3 levels. He's an excellent defender. He's a solid
No, his
rebounder,
weakness was that
passer.
he pissed his pants in the playoffs, but prior to this postseason where he
kind
was
of got
brilliant.
over that a little bit, right? So yeah, let's give him credit for that. I think Chris Paul, look, who had a great year. I think he's obviously on the downside, but look, he even had a decent final. He averaged 22 and 8 in the finals. It's not like he sucked in the finals. It's that the Suns could not figure out a way to stop Giannis. I still put Kyrie up there because the talent level is just, exquisite. Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, Trae Young. Look, I put Ben Simmons in there because the talent is incredible, but I don't think he could fog up a mirror at times.
He's not in my top 30 right now, Seth, Ben Simmons.
Yeah, I know you're not a big fan. I just think if he, oh my God, I would like to be his life coach because I would just say, look, you have so much ability and you could be one of the 5 best players in the league. Like, just give it a try, see what happens. But maybe he's just not wired that way. Some guys just aren't wired that way. And then other guys that don't have a tenth of the talent, bust their ass as much as they can. But look, that's how deep the league is, though. Where you have Ben Simmons outside your top 30, we know he's talented enough to be that good, but that's how deep and talented the league is right now.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about Zion, who could potentially be, vault into the top 10. Ja Morant could certainly do that too. We didn't talk about some veteran guys like Westbrook and Jimmy Butler, who are still, definitely impactful players. Karl Anthony Towns, who a couple of years ago, GMs said they would build their team around. He's still, if he ever is able to figure it out, maybe he could be a top 10 player. He's got the talent. So yeah, the league's in great hands. I mean, nobody doubts that, Sep. So my final top 10, Giannis at 1, Kevin Durant, LeBron, Luka, Jokic, Steph, Embiid, Harden, Kawhi, and Lillard. And Sap, what was your top 10 again?
Giannis, Durant, LeBron, in a class unto themselves. Those are the 3 candidates to be the best player in the world right now. I have, again, Giannis at 1, Kevin Durant at 2, and LeBron at 3. I got Luka at 4, Steph at 5, Kawhi at 6, Joel Embiid at 7, James Harden at 8, Nikola Jokic at 9, and Damian Lillard at 10. So we have the same top 10, just in a different order. Here's the interesting thing I did in some of this research, Jet, and I know how important high draft picks are, and that draft capital is so important. You can still find great players later in the draft. And from 10 down to 1 in this order, Damian Lillard was the 6th pick in his draft. Jokic was number 41, James Harden number 3, Joel Embiid number 3, Kawhi Leonard was number 15, Steph Curry number 7, Doncic number 3, LeBron, the only player in the top 10 who was the first overall pick, Durant was number 2, and Giannis was number 15. So yes, it's great to have 1, 2, or 3.
It's a good balance
but you have a balance there.
Draft picks there, right?
2 guys drafted at 15th are in that list, and no one's disputing Kawhi and Giannis being in the top 10. And then you got Jokic, who's really an outlier at number 41. I mean, that happens about once every 15 years. But you can get really good players at 6, like Damian Lillard or Steph Curry at number 7. They're there. And that's why I always
look at the guys you mentioned, Sep, right after Paul George and Donovan Mitchell. Neither one of them were high draft picks.
No, not at all. I mean, obviously, Anthony Davis was 1. Chris Paul, I believe, was the 4th overall pick. Kyrie was number 1. Tatum, number 3. I get all that. But Booker was 13th, right? You found yourself a great player at number 13. Trae Young was number 5. So yeah, I mean, you can.
Jimmy Butler, I think, was 31.
I think he was the last pick in the first round. So
30. Yeah.
You can obviously give me the first pick and go at it from there. But also, Michael Olowokandi was the first pick in the draft. That didn't work out. So all-time greats. I think what was Dirk? Was he 10th and Pierce was 8th, or the other way around?
No, other way around.
Other way around. So you two all-time great players, 8th and 10th. So you can find players there, and they don't even have to be all-time greats. That's where I think the Celtics really shot themselves in the foot when they had those mid-first round picks, and they ended up with Romeo Langford, who, as we talked about in the earlier podcast, you despise,
please.
Probably your least favorite player in the league, and Aaron Nesmith. We'll see what he is.
Future star. Future star.
Your future star. I mean, at least you know what you got to find in that spot. At least someone who has a skill. Like
Nesmith has a skill.
He has a skill. He can shoot. That's something. Whereas Langford, and I was watching some of the summer league, and Brian Scalabrine, who's done like a 180 doing the games, which I appreciate. He's not afraid to criticize the Celtics. Maybe he's been listening to Dennis Eckersley on Nesson criticizing the Red Sox, deservedly so. But Scalabrine's talking about, I don't know if Langford can ever be the guy because there's an issue with effort. Like if that's a problem, then the player's never going to live up to anywhere near his potential, and we don't even know what his potential is. But my greater point is, you could still get really good players, at 6, 7, 15, whatever the case may be. Draymond Green was a second-round pick. Dennis Rodman was a second-round pick. Now, again, it's better to have a top 3 pick. I get that, but that's why I get turned off when people say, "Oh, if you're not in the top 3 or 4, you can't add great players." Well, that's not true.
Yeah, I agree. And we've talked about this a lot before. It's just going to continue to happen more and more. There's more talent going into the NBA as it's growing internationally, as more players in this country are opting to play basketball instead of football because of health and safety issues. You're just going to find more and more talent in the NBA. So those are our top 10 as it stands today. We reserve the right to change our mind as the season goes on, and we almost certainly will. Sap, I'm sure, will wake up from this daze that he's in and put LeBron as one. I don't know how that didn't happen. Something's clearly wrong with him. But we will be back.
I still have Aaron Rodgers number 1 at quarterback. He is the reigning MVP.
You can at least make that case with Aaron Rodgers, because he did win MVP. LeBron didn't win MVP last year.
No,
his team lost in the first round of the playoffs. It's a harder case to make.
Exactly.
But all right, so check us out. We are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. You can find us wherever podcasts are found. If you haven't already, check out our Twitters at Jet Stryer, at John Sap 25. And you can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Jet Stryer. We're presented by Full Press Coverage. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we will talk to you later. See ya.